would like to introduce our next speakers. And by way of background, 2 years ago, when Diane and I met with Brad Smith from Intuit, we asked how could we enhance the summit and what should we bring to bear in terms of new content and interesting ideas. At that point, Brad said, well, you obviously need to engage with Liz Wiseman and her team, and they have had the biggest impact on our organization, Intuit, in delivering their messaging around the multiplier and some other leadership concepts. So many of you had the good fortune of seeing Liz's presentation last year, and just not to share inside data, but frankly, it was the highest ranked presentation of all the presentations. So, we're very fortunate to have Liz and her colleague, Shawn, come back this year, and they're going to share with you a little bit of a different idea of people who may participate in part of the presentation from last year can opt to see a different presentation for the sort of second half of what we're going through today. So with that, let me introduce Liz and Shawn, and they're with the Wiseman Group. The Multipliers, is a phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, we've included some of the materials in the slideshow and the brochure of different slides, and we really thank their participation because they really have had a huge impact. And many of the attendees last year were just fascinated by the advice and the exercise in the workshop they performed. So thank you, Liz.
Okay, it is so good. It's so good to be here because I see a lot of familiar faces and people that have become friends to me. And the only thing better about getting to come again here this year is getting to come again with one of my best friends, Shawn Vanderhoven, who's not only an incredible friend of mine, I get to work with him. And Shawn is as funny as he is smart. And we've worked together for about 3 years now, and I've never had a bad day working with Shawn. Never. I can't even think of a bad moment I've had working with Shawn. We're going to do a couple sessions. We're going to take a break here in a few minutes. We're going to get started here together. But I want to tell you a little bit about the story behind multipliers. It's a little bit my story. It's a little bit Bill Campbell's story. And I hope it will become all of our story here today. I graduated from college and took a job, like a lot of you. And I took a job for this young maverick software company. They were kind of just beyond the startup days. All my friends at business school wondered why I was going to work for this toothpaste manufacturer called Oracle. They assumed that's what Oracle did, was made toothpaste. Oracle was known for hiring this little trifecta of talent. And they had this very unique hiring profile. They looked for three things. Number one, they looked for raw intelligence, smarts. Two, they looked for achievement orientation, a freaky achievement orientation, like people who just have this drive. And third, they looked for people who were nice. Now I'll give you one guess. Of those three, which do you think they often compromised on? Sometimes they compromised on nice. And I went to work in this company surrounded by all these really brilliant, driven, mostly nice people. And I was fascinated. Like once I got in there, I was blown away by how smart everyone was. And it wasn't like an imposter syndrome kicked in. It's not like I didn't feel like I deserved to be there. I just felt in awe that I was there because I was surrounded by all of these brilliant people. And I started to watch. In some ways, I became a genius watcher, absolutely fascinated by the intelligence around me. Now, because it was a young, growing firm, doubling every year, I got thrown into management. I got thrown into management as a child. I was like 24 years old when I was put in charge of the training operation for the company. They said, Liz, we need a university. Would you go build a university? Now, I'm like a year out of university, and I pointed out that I was a little bit underqualified for that job. They didn't seem to mind. They said, well, you know what, just go build us a university. So I got thrown into management, and I started to notice some things about the managers. I noticed that because they are all brilliant. Everyone on the executive team was brilliant. I noticed that brilliance doesn't always spawn other brilliance. Not all the people who were brilliant created brilliance around them. I noticed there was a lot of really, really smart people who, when they walked in the room, other smart people got quiet. They shut down. They held back. I noticed that there were a lot of leaders who used their intelligence as a weapon. Have you ever seen a really smart person use their intelligence as a weapon? You know the effect they have when they walk in a room, don't you? You probably know the effect they have on you. But I also noticed another breed of leaders. Now, they're equally smart, but they have a very different impact on other people. See, these leaders, instead of causing people to shut down, these leaders caused other people to be smart. See, they didn't use their intelligence as a weapon as much as they used it as a tool for solving hard problems, a tool for innovating. And I was fascinated by this. I was fascinated. Why do we seem to be so smart, so capable, so at our very best, at our most brilliant around some leaders, but why do we shut down, play it safe, and hold back around others? It was so curious to me. Fast forward 17 years, I leave Oracle. I still have this question in mind. I decide it's worth pursuing. I research it. I start writing a book. Why do some leaders seem to be diminishers to others, while other leaders seem to multiply, to amplify the talent of people around them? I'm writing my book. I go to visit the people at Kleiner Perkins. I'm talking to John Doerr. I'm talking to Ray Lane. And they said, Liz, you know, this multiplier idea, it's interesting. You know, there's someone we want you to talk with. You know, there's someone in our firm, now they're the venture capital firm that has invested in Sun, Amazon, Google, et cetera. They said, you know, there's a person that we use inside our firm to go in and coach some of the starting companies, some of these young entrepreneurs, these brilliant people who are trying to build a brilliant organization. Like he was an amazing CEO at Intuit, and now he's the coach to some of the biggest, hottest companies in Silicon Valley. His name is Bill Campbell. We want you to go see him. Great. They're like, he's a total multiplier in your vernacular. So I make a point with Bill. I go down to his office in Palo Alto, and I sit down with the coach, and I explain the concept to him. You know, some leaders seem to bring out the intelligence and brilliance in others, and he goes, it's what I spend most of my time doing, helping leaders to do this. And he said, but you know, I began my career as one of the great diminishers of all times. And then he starts to tell me that he was a raging diminisher, told everyone what to do. And now I'm upset because I went there to interview a multiplier, and I was getting a diminisher story. But he told me a story. I later, and he told me that story, he told me many more. Let me share with you his story about moving from being quite the diminisher to being a multiplier.
In my early days in management, I came from a background where, football, the more you knew, the better you were. And I think what you do in the situations that you're in when you're management, you want to show everybody that you know everything. And so what you do is you kind of dominate the conversations, you tell people what you think, and you're not listening. And sooner or later it comes upon you that, I'm really screwing this thing up. I'm not getting the best ideas from the best people. And I think over a long period of my early career, as I look back on it, I was one of the great diminishers of all time.
And he
Donna was
continues.
sent to me as an emissary from the group and sat down with me one afternoon and said, "You're back to your old ways. You're not letting us do the jobs that we were hired to do. If we can't participate with you, then it's not going to be any fun being here. If you're going to make every decision and manage everything yourself, then this company's never going to be great, and we're never going to enjoy it." Whew, what a blast. And it was one of those things that when you went home that night, you recognized, gosh, you did me a great favor, and I really had to go about making a behavior change. What I decided to do was make sure that I used the best of their thinking. And we did so many unconventional and unusual things at Claris that made us a very unique software company, mostly because I delegated to people who knew a whole hell of a lot more about their function than I did. And once you recognize that when you step back and were able to assess what they were doing, and you knew it was just enormously better than what you were doing, you recognize that there was a true management team. And today when I coach young people in Silicon Valley, I try to make sure they understand what it means to be surrounded by a management team that can each provide expertise and contribution to the entire process.
So Bill gets done telling me his story about how he was a micromanager and a dictator and a diminisher to his colleagues and the people who worked for him, and how he became not only a multiplier, but a coach to other multipliers, a multiplier of multipliers. We finished our conversation. It was the first of many conversations that Bill and I had about leadership. And then he gave me some coaching. The coach gave me some coaching. He, in Steve and Ronnie's term, he jumped me. Because what he did, this man I barely knew, we get up, we finish our meetings where I'm saying goodbye. He grabs me by the shoulders and he looks me in the eye and he says, "Liz, this is an important idea." He said, this can be a really important book. And then the coach looked me in the eyes and he says, "Just don't F it up." Okay, he didn't abbreviate that. And I actually found this strangely encouraging and motivating. Bill Campbell was special. He was special as an executive. He was special as a coach.
The question maybe we should ask is, was he special? Is Bill the kind of leader that, this raging multiplier that we can model ourselves after? Is it even possible for us to lead like Bill Campbell? As we've considered that question, as we've researched and worked with companies all around the world on whether or not all of us can lead like these incredible people like Bill, what we found is that multipliers are everywhere, even in cultures and in industries where you'd assume that these ideas might be subversive. Let me share with you a few leaders that we found that were multipliers against all odds. Like, for example, what if your boss was Elon Musk? Could you be a raging multiplier if you worked for Elon Musk? I mean, he's a genius and he has Twitter. Well, John McNeil was brought into Tesla to lead North and South America. Pretty much the main deal. And when he got there, there was a feeling of fear. It was said to him that, you've got to be careful if you look Elon in the eyes. And here he is now on his staff, working directly for him with huge responsibility, with making way for the Model 3. And let me tell you what John was able to do. Not only was he able to deal with Elon Musk and get even better work from Elon. We'll talk about how do you deal with somebody, a raging, maybe we could say an accidental or a diminisher. We'll talk about this idea on how do you deal with diminishing bosses before we leave together today. But not only could John deal with Elon, he created a subculture within Tesla that our friend Ben, who worked for him, said he created an environment where everyone knew that if you worked for John, your talents would be utilized and they would be developed. He was a lifelong learner, and he had this capability to create a culture within what had been explained as a fairly diminishing culture, that if you could work for John, not only would your talents be recognized and named, they would be fully utilized, and so everybody wanted to work for John, even though there was huge risk to be working directly on his team in a culture that was previously full of fear. Or what about another example? Think about, let's talk a little bit about Susan Brown. In a culture where she was responsible at Gap for all of their stores. And for those of you that know this kind of fast-paced industry and the clothing, everyone's crazy about designs, and the devil is in the details. And so oftentimes you end up with a boss that you could kind of, imagine in your mind the devil wears Prada, who can tend to be a little bit of a diminishing boss. But what was said about Susan was that she wasn't the kind of person that led stores in a way where she wanted to tell you how to fold sweaters. Instead, she was a liberator. She created an environment where people knew where they could take risks and where they couldn't. And they said that she knew how to speed up people's growth by letting off the brakes so other people could accelerate. Or maybe the most infamous diminishing type culture that we talk about, this top-down culture that we all know about in the Department of Defense. This idea that the brains come from the top and they get pushed down, and you just do the orders that you have. We're all familiar with these ideas. I mean, who hasn't seen in here A Few Good Men? Has everyone seen A Few Good Men in here? What's the famous line? You've got this incredible leader. He's on trial, and what does he say? You can't handle the truth. What does it infer about everybody else that works below these leaders? Does it infer that they're smart and capable? No, it infers that they are order takers. But Lieutenant Colonel Mark Kaiser, he had a different way of operating. In his wing, as a fighter pilot, he knew that the most important thing that he could do was not just take orders from the top to the bottom, but to figure out where the intelligence was from the bottom up. He knew that not only did people need to do their job, what they're required to do, but you also have to tap into what it is that people aspire to be and develop that capability as well. He was an investor. He had figured out how to give ownership to people and to grow their capability through that ownership so they could fully be utilized in the positions that they're in instead of just being an order taker. There's one more person that I want to talk about for a second that's not up there. I'll choke up a little bit. I'm an emotional dude. Maybe that's not tough. But there's this lady that I know. Her name's Liz Wiseman. And so I started working with her years ago. And let me just tell you about where I was before I showed up to work with Liz. I just got my ass kicked by a really interesting boss. Who here had a multiplier coach, but your previous coach was a bit of a diminisher, and you went into that new environment a little afraid to make mistakes? Has anyone had that experience here? I joined Liz's team, and one day we were in a meeting, and we were talking about the second edition of the book, and we were repeating this research to really see what can we learn now that the book's been out 7 years, to really bring a second edition of the book that will provide insights to people that knew these ideas, but they wanted more. So one day I opened my big mouth at a meeting and said, hey, listen, I don't think that the final chapter that we have really reflects what we've learned in the last 7 years on how do you become a multiplier and how do you create a culture where all of the intelligence is harvested and fully utilized. And she looked at me and she's like, well, it sounds to me like that you need to do the thinking behind that chapter. And I thought to myself, well, that's not what I was volunteering for, Liz. I was just trying to make a comment that I think we need to have a little bit more of an insightful end. No, she said, no, actually, you need to own the research portion for this and put together the plan so we can write this chapter. Well, I left feeling a little worried that I was going to make mistakes, worked on pulling together some research from the companies that we'd worked with. Pretty much went and researched with the very best companies in the world that we had done work to say, how do you create an intelligence culture where everybody's intelligence is utilized through your leadership? Put together the research, sent it to her at 9 o'clock at night. Had worked all day, and at that time, I lived here in the area, didn't have an office, so I was working out on my desk. It's November. It's about 40 degrees at night, not real cold. Sent this email to her. I knew she was going to be speaking the next morning in St. Louis, and said, Liz, here's the work. Take a look at the research. Let me know what you think. I got into bed and thought, I better check my email just to make sure that it's sent. Saw an email from Liz, and this is what it said. It said, Shawn, you know I love you, but this work is shit. I don't have time to tell you what's wrong with it right now, but I can say this. You can choose to try to re-go through it and fix it up with a few recommendations, or we can exclude it from the book. So it was 9 o'clock, and I thought to myself, well, what do I do? I'm not too sure that I can really do this. She left me a vote of confidence in the very last line. But I think if you choose to work on this, you can nail it. I got out of bed, went out on the porch, put my warm clothes on, and I started to work. And I worked until she said she was going to be in St. Louis. You can send this to me by 7 a.m. I worked until 4:59 a.m. all through the night, sent it to her. I got an email back at 7:01 her time, 5:01 my time, and it said, I can use this. Great job. Liz has been an incredible multiplier to me and everyone else that I've ever seen her work with. She's not just someone who observes this, but she's someone who actually knows how to do this. And let me tell you the journey that she's taken me on. First, I've learned that becoming a multiplier is about language. When we get the language, it gives us the ability to name things that we didn't understand before. Remember when you were first playing football? I've got a son going through this, and you didn't know the routes or you didn't know the plays. And you went to the coach, and maybe the coach said, you go learn from somebody else. I don't have time to teach you. And you were afraid to try because you knew what you were supposed to do, but you couldn't name it. But do you remember what it felt like when you got the language? When you were able to name what you were supposed to do? Well, first, our first goal for you in this is to provide you with the language to be able to figure out where might you be diminishing others, accidentally or intentionally. And then once we have the language, we can have an awareness. And through that awareness, it gives us the ability to admit where we're wrong. Or admit where we might be diminishing others. This is a safe place for you to admit where you might be accidentally or intentionally diminishing others. And once we admit it, we can ask for help. And that's when the brilliance happens. That's when we build support to change our behavior. And so today we're going to take you on a journey to get you this language. And we're going to do a two-part. For those of you who were with us last year, we're going to do an advanced clinic. You have some of the language. We're going to build on that and help you build skills. For those of you that weren't here last year, you're going to stay in this room, and we're going to take you through the fundamental ideas behind multiplier versus diminisher, and we're going to try to give you the language that you'll need to really extract intelligence from those people that you work with. And you're going to be with me if you're going to do the advanced clinic, if you were here last year, and you're going to be with Liz if you weren't here last year. Liz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Shawn went off-road with that story. And I did not say your work was shit.
Well, I
would not have ever done that. But I probably used more words to describe it. That was probably shorthand. Okay, so here's the plan. Here's the plan. If you are brand new to the summit, if you are brand new to the concept of multipliers, you are going to stay here in this room, and I am going to be with you. I cannot wait to meet everyone. We will not be doing a lecture. It is going to be an interactive workshop. We're going to have some fun. If you are a returner to the summit, if you have done the session with me last year on multipliers, you're going to go to Shawn. He's going to do the advanced session. He will probably talk about my diminishing ways in that session.
As soon as we get out of the room, yes.
Now, if you are a returner and you've done some things on multipliers and you want to go back to the basics, like you forgot, you're welcome to stay. Go to whichever room. Advanced techniques over there in Blout Hall. We're going to get started with this idea of what is a leader and what kind of impact can you have, and how might you, with the very best of intentions, be becoming a diminisher. Feel free to take a 10-minute bio break and either come back into this room or go have fun with Shawn. Either way, we hope you're going to learn something, have fun with us today, and thank you. I am so glad to meet you. Welcome to the summit. Now, I see a couple people that I've met before, but hopefully we're going to have a good conversation here. We're going to have a good think together, and we're going to think together about how we really build intelligent teams. How do we lead in a way that we're getting access to all of the intelligence that's around us? I'm going to ask you to be thinking a lot about your own intelligence, and I'm going to be asking you to think about the intelligence of your team. And by intelligence, I mean the ability of people to think and reason and make hard decisions, and the ability to adapt as the world is changing around you. I'm going to be asking you to think about how your own intelligence, how your own talent, how your own capability affects the people around you. I'm going to be asking you to think, like, do the smartest leaders always build the smartest teams? And I'm going to be asking you to think about how might your own capability be costing other people their capability. That's what we're going to talk about. You know, this idea, it actually was born from this observation that I had, and this was from my time at Oracle, where I served as an executive there, is that there's a lot of people who come to work every day who would say they are busy, but then they would secretly tell you that they're bored. They would say they're working hard, they're working to their fullest, maybe they're even exhausted, they're probably overworked, but yet at the very same time they're underutilized. Who here has had a job, a time where you were both exhausted, you were overworked and underutilized? Who's had that experience? Yeah, what's it like to be overworked and underutilized? What's that experience like? And you know, we're going to do a lot of shouting today. So I do not want anyone, if you would do me the favor and do not raise your hand today, like I want you to just join the conversation, okay? So we're going to practice the ancient art of shouting. I've got 4 kids and I've got some teenagers in that mix, so I do really well in total chaos. Okay, so this is going to be a free-for-all. So what's it like to be overworked and underutilized? It's diminishing, it's disempowering, it's unfulfilling. Okay, Josiah just says it sucks. He just goes right to the end of the story. Yeah, a lot of people say it's soul-sucking. What else is it like? It's insulting. Yes, it's demoralizing. It's disrespectful. It's tiring. It's exhausting. See, I think it's a dirty little secret of the corporate world that we don't talk about very much. I like to talk about it. See, there's a lot of people who are busy but bored. There's a lot of people who are underutilized, but yet they're exhausted. Why is it exhausting being underutilized? Like, can't you make a case that's a good gig, being underutilized? Why is it exhausting? It's not inspiring. Yeah, no point in being here. Right. You're showing up, but you don't really get to show up, do you? I once asked this question. It was a room, I don't know, maybe 10 times as big as this room. It was a really large room. And I asked, why is it exhausting to be underutilized? And at the back of the room was actually a huge ballroom full of educational leaders from across the state of California. And in the back of the room, there was someone who definitely took me up on this offer for shouting, because she yells at the top of her lungs. She says, because it's a lot of work to act this stupid. See, why would an otherwise smart, capable person have to act stupid? Like, what's that act for? Who is she making room for? So it's actually this idea that there is latent intelligence, latent capability all around us. There's underutilized talent, and it is available to you as a leader. And it's actually a pretty good gig for the leader to get all of the intelligence of people around them. And it's a pretty good gig for the talent, for the contributor. Why? Purpose, deep fulfillment. Okay, so it led to this idea: leaders, multiplier, leaders, diminisher. Shawn shared with you some examples of these multiplier leaders. They're everywhere, but so are diminishers. here's what I'm going to do. We're going to show you just a little video, get us started. Leader as Diminisher and leader as Multiplier.
What is the fate of the smart and the talented? The corporate world finds smart, talented people and promotes them into management. But many of these leaders never look beyond their own capability to see the full genius on their team. Have you ever worked around someone who made you feel smarter and more capable? We call these leaders multipliers. Have you ever worked around someone who made you question your own intelligence? We call these leaders diminishers. They may hire smart people, but they quickly put other people in the background. They are smart leaders, but they shut down the smarts of others. Diminishers come at such a high cost, they waste talent and intellect that sits right in front of them. Organizations can't afford diminishers. Multipliers come from all walks of life, from corporate boardrooms to our school's classrooms. They are leaders like Lut Ziob, Bill Campbell, Wangari Maathai, and many more. These people are real, and the way they lead can be learned and it can be developed. What would happen in your organization if you operated more like a multiplier? Imagine what is possible with access to all the intelligence that sits in your organization.
Okay, as you were watching this video, did anyone here have names of people come to mind? Okay, I hope you did. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to scan back across your career. And I mean, this could be a career that started as a young man playing football. And I want you to pick a boss, a coach, a teacher, someone who was a diminisher to you. Someone who's surrounded by smart people, talented people, capable people, but yet problems aren't getting solved. Hard things aren't getting tackled. You're holding back. You're not really giving your all. Does everyone have one? Can everyone find one? Okay, I want you to lock their name in your head, and I want you to be thinking about what did they do? Like, how did they coach? How did they teach? How did they lead, okay? And what impact did they have on you? Now, I want everyone to scan back on that same time period, and I want you to find a boss, a coach, a teacher, it could be a colleague, could be a family member who was a multiplier to you. Someone around whom you were at your best. You might have done your best work around this person. My hope is everyone has one. And then I've got a couple questions for you. Now, on the back of in your booklet there, I don't know what page it is, but there are 4 boxes that look like this. If there's a page number somewhere, 20? 46. 46. Would you open to page 46? And there are 4 questions, and I'd love for you to take 2 minutes and write down the answers to this. The first question is, what did your diminisher do? And if you would you describe their behavior, not how you felt about them, not their kind of personal characteristics. If I was watching film of how they led a staff meeting, how they led a hallway coaching session, how they led a sideline coaching session, a team meeting, what would I notice? Second question is a tricky one. The question is, how much of your intelligence did he or she get from you? And I want you to write a number down between 0 and 100. 100 is all of your know-how, your intellect, your insights, your capability. Here's why it's a tricky question, is I'm not asking you how hard you are working. Now, you could have been working extremely hard. I just want you to write down how much of your capability did they get based on the way he or she led. Does that make sense? Not how hard you're working, how much of your capability. Write that number down, and then answer the same 2 questions for the multiplier leader. What would the film show for this leader? How much of your capability did he or she get? And go ahead and take 2 minutes. We're going to do a little reflecting on this. Okay, you might just have keywords written down. That is great. Here's what I want you to do. We're going to talk about this. And I want you to gather we're going to completely ignore these stationary objects called these days. So we're going to pretend these aren't here. What I want you to do is I want you to just gather yourself in a group of about 6 people. And this is a great chance to, get some standing time during the day. Use the hallways, use the stage if you want. About 6 people, no more than 8. And what I want you to do is you're going to have about 3 minutes for the first half, 3 minutes for the second half. First half is the diminisher. I want you to go around the circle and share what did your diminisher do. Now let me explain. The most important part of the whole conversation is no stories, just describe the behavior. I can tell you from sad experience, these conversations very rapidly descend into diminisher therapy sessions, okay? So I know Ronnie said it's great to have a therapist, not now. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to just you don't have to tell the story, he did this and I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. Just describe the behavior, go around the group, and I want you to be listening carefully to what people are describing because I want you to look for what is common. What do these diminishing leaders tend to do? Yes?
So I want to preface this by saying I'm a little more seasoned than most of the gentlemen here. I've been out of school for a while now. But so I'm in medicine, right? It's a culture where oftentimes people will beat you down in order to build you up, right? And so I know I've talked to some young guys where they're going to be surgeons and different things in medicine. I struggle a little bit with your second part of your question, though, because you asked how much intelligence did he or she get out of you. And I've always been the kind of person where no matter if I have a finisher, right, you're trying to beat me.
Would you tell me your name?
I'm Brandon Roberts.
Brandon? Brandon, this is a great conversation. I want it to start in your group. So if you would, I want you to have that very same conversation in your group, and then I want the whole group to tell me what you noticed. Because we're going to look for patterns across everyone's experience. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Describe that behavior. Then what you're going to do is you are going to answer that second, the trickier part, as Brandon said to that question. How much of your intelligence did he or she get? Give a number. If you struggle with that, share that struggle with that team. Because then I'm going to ask everyone to share that number with me. We're going to calculate an average across the group. And then at halftime, we're going to do the very same thing for the multiplier. Yes? Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to quantify as best as you can how much of your brain power, your know-how, was being used based on how this leader led. That's easy? Okay. Any more clarification needed on this? Now, if you need to change your number, go ahead and change that right now. Now, for some of you who are going to huddle up in groups, if you wrote the name of your diminisher, now's a really good time to just cross that out because you guys are going to be talking about this, okay? So change your number if you need to, cross that name out. 3 minutes on your diminisher, then I'm going to ask you to switch to the multiplier. Thanks for the questions, and go. You had a chance to reflect on 2 different leaders. Some of them might have been in the workplace, some of you might have thought of coaches. You had a chance to hear 5 other guys talk about their experience. What did you notice? So we're going to start with the diminisher. What did you notice that diminishing leaders tend to do? Okay, now we're not going to do any hand raising today. I only permit shouting. Now, I realize there are some of you who are devout introverts. And the idea of shouting out what you're thinking is like anathema to you. So here's what we're going to do. For those of you who are interviews, I love you. And here's what I want you to do. If you have an idea, you just whisper it to your loudmouth, extroverted neighbor, and you let them do your dirty work for you, okay? So what did you notice about the diminishers? They micromanage. They're critical. They make questions unwelcome. They tear people down. They don't lead, they dictate. They don't ask you questions. Why don't they ask you questions? Because they don't care what you think. And why don't they care what you think? Because they're so busy caring what they think, right? Yeah, what else? What did you notice your diminishers do? They don't listen, they don't care. They really don't care. What do they care about? Everyone cares, right? What do they care about? Yeah, themselves. Where's their orientation? Themselves. Yeah, I noticed that these leaders, they tend to radiate out. They push out. They push out ideas. That idea of like where the orientation is, it reminds me of a conversation. I live just a mile down the road. And, this is kind of the heart of Silicon Valley. There's a lot of tech professionals in this area. Of course, there's a lot of tech titans in this area. And so the book Multipliers has just come out. And I brought some books today. I brought what I could carry. Didn't realize I couldn't park right next to the building, so I had to carry about like 80 pounds of books, a couple blocks. So I brought some. We've got some more. Amazon's dropping some more a little bit later. But anyway, the book has just come out. It's maybe been out for a month or two. It's at the stage in the book where I'm just happy if anyone other than a family member has read this book, okay? And people are telling me they had read the book. I'm like, no, you haven't read the book. You can't have read the book because we're not related. Or like, no, you can't have read the book because I didn't make you read the book. Like, I'm just finding people are reading the book. So I'm at this dinner party, and I happen to be sitting next to a founder and CEO of a major, of a tech company here in this area, a major employer. And this is not Steve Jobs, it's not Larry Ellison either, whom I worked for a number of years. And he says to me, he goes, hey, Liz, what's this multipliers thing that I'm hearing about? I'm like, oh, you're hearing about it, really? And I'm super excited. And he asked me about it. And you never want to ask an author about her book about 2 months out. Like, ask me about it now. But, I'm like so excited. So I'm winding up to tell him the whole story and give him the whole, like, chapter by chapter description of this. And, of course, a little bit of wisdom kicks in. Like, he doesn't care about the chapter by chapter thing. He wants the cocktail party answer, right? So I like muster my strength. I give him the cocktail party answer, which is, it's about a leader who uses his or her intelligence in a way that brings out intelligence in others. I'm super proud that I could sum that up. And I'm waiting for his reaction, and he goes, oh, that's really interesting. What you're saying is like, these are leaders who multiply their ideas. I'm just thinking what Bill Campbell would have said to him. Can you imagine the script that would have come out of his mouth? No, I'm like, well, okay. So I'm disappointed in his interpretation of my little, and so I'm thinking, you know what, better, because what was a PR moment now is a coaching moment. That's way better. And he runs a pretty big company, and I'm really excited to help him see that this is not about multiplying his ideas. So I explained to him one more time. I said, well, it's a little different. It's actually, it's a leader who uses his or her intelligence in a way that amplifies intelligence and ideas and capability in others. Now, I said the very same thing the second time that I said the first time. I used some different body language, like other people, right? Other people have ideas. And so I'm like emphasizing the people around him. And he's like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, my bad. Like, I get it. He goes, and he's actually really excited now, and I'm super excited, and I'm thinking about, like, the impact this is, like, the ripple effect across his organization. And he goes, so these are leaders who multiply themselves. So imagine, like, the body language I'm having to maintain in this conversation. And he's like, these are leaders who, like, multiply themselves so that everyone in the organization does what they want them to do. Okay, that was not a couple degrees off, right? That was like a 180 on the concept. And of course, it's a humbling moment for me because I'm realizing that my coaching moment, like I've done more damage than good, right? Because it's way worse the second time. I should have just left it at this. I had to change the conversation to like something less controversial, like, well, let's talk about war, or like religion. So what's your religion, So why couldn't he see it? Where's his orientation? So he's a founder, CEO. When he drives into the office, parks his car, goes through the front door, what is he there to do in his mind? He's in charge. It's his ideas. You can get yourself inside the founder head. I'm a founder too. I kind of know, I sympathize with this. Like, my job is to think stuff up and then do what? Did you say the minions? Yeah, the minions, the little people, like go out and execute. Like, I'm the head of the organization. How often do we refer to people as the head of the organization? Now, I don't know about you, but if you tell me that I'm the head of the organization, it's not too far for me to then believe my job is to do the thinking. And other people are like the arms, the legs, sort of appendages to the brains of the organization. It's the model he's operating under. Like his orientation, what does he care about? Replicating his ideas, multiplying his ideas, getting other people to do the things he would want them to do. Okay, what else did you notice about your diminisher? Or people talking about their diminishers, they manipulate. They limit skills. Interesting, they limit skills. They insult you by, like over insulting, because Bill Campbell insulted me several times.
Personal insults. You did something wrong and that was right for issue with you as a human being.
Oh, so they're looking at you rather than what you did. Okay? Yeah, not that we remember those things. Okay, now, how much of your capability did this diminisher get from you? So if your group calculated an average, and no one told you had to do math here, but we'll just do some basic math. I want you to shout it out. Now, here's what I need. And I realize I'm in a group of scholar athletes, and some of you probably were math majors and science majors. So what I need is someone here who will calculate an average of these averages. So you can be a math savant, or you could just have a calculator handy. Either one of those is good for me. Okay, so do I have a volunteer, or should we just crowdsource this number? Crowdsource? Okay, you got Elliot. You're on this job. Okay, Elliot, thank you. If your group calculated average, go ahead and tell me. 25. 30. 24. 54. 60. 43, 55, 58, 57, 50, 60, 92. 92.5, he says, like we did the math over here. Okay, show-offs over there. 37, 40, 55, 53, 29. Okay. We're going to give Elliot some time to calculate that. Now, while he's doing that, what I want you to do is I want you to just momentarily get inside the head of that diminishing leader. What did he or she believe to be true? That they were the smartest person in the room, that they were right, that they were always right, I heard. What else? What did your diminisher believe? That they're a dictator.
If something went wrong, it was your fault.
That if something went wrong, it was your fault. Okay, so one of the things we notice is that many of these diminishing leaders hold this assumption that they're right. Like, and almost like, I'm surrounded by idiots, so I've got to make the decisions. We notice many of the diminishers had a more subtle assumption. Can you repeat that for us? Your diminisher believed that. I heard it. Am I hearing voices? No, I said something. You said something.
You so intently, I forgot what I said.
Oh my goodness, that is sucking up at the most beautiful level. Okay, here, I remember what you said. You said my diminisher thought he was being helpful, that he was doing it the right way. Did any of you have a diminisher who actually really thought he or she was helping you? Yes. Now, did any of you have a diminisher that was actually a pretty nice person? Yes. Yeah. Anyone have a diminisher who actually really cared about you? No. Okay, yeah. Now, if you had the opposite experience, I don't want to deny your experience. But a lot of people actually have diminishers who are trying to do this right. We're going to get into that a little bit later. Elliot, do we have a number or something like a number? 47. 47%. 47, 40. Now, interesting, when I did this research, and we've calculated this number across every continent. We've done it over tens of thousands of people. And we find the number comes around 48%. So you guys are kind of right on the norm with this. Now, so I don't need to point out the obvious. This is less than half. It's less than half. We find these diminishing leaders get less than half of people's available ideas, insights, intelligence, capability. How much were you willing? I want you to go back into that moment, that person you're working for. How much were you willing to give? Everything you had. You know, it's interesting. It really is an honor to be with you. Like, I was so excited to say yes to come the first time, even more excited to come down and spend time with you the second time and to bring Shawn with me. I'm like, Shawn, you just got to come down. This is an amazing group of people. Like, it doesn't surprise me that you, like these, nominated, venerated scholar athletes would say, I wanted to give 100%. Okay, that probably doesn't surprise you. But it surprised you that people in corporations all around the world say the very same thing? People in manufacturing jobs. What I've learned, so I study leadership. I get to study and teach leadership all around the world. It's a great job. It's great work. I love it. What I've learned doing this, in some ways, has very little to do with leadership. What I've learned is more about followership. And what I've learned, and this crosses continents, is that people come to work every day desperately wanting to give 100% of their intelligence. And when they don't, when they can't, when they run into these glass walls where the boss doesn't see it or the boss doesn't feel she needs it, it becomes these kind of, as Josiah said, it just sucks. Right? But people want to give 100%. What happens in an organization where people come to work wanting to give 100%, but they have leaders who only use half of it? Like in this gap between 47 and 100, what breeds? What grows in that gap? Resentment grows, frustration grows, turnover grows, boredom. And what comes after boredom? Cynicism. I think I once asked this to, I think it was Twilio, a software company up in the city. They make amazing things. Asked what gets, I said, what grows? And they're like, what gets built in this gap? And they're like really crappy products is what gets built in that gap, right? Suboptimal thinking, suboptimal work gets built in that gap. Okay, so that's the diminishing leader. Talk to me about the multiplier leader. What did you notice from your own experience and listening to others? What is common across these multiplier leaders? They equip you. Wow, I've never heard that expressed that way. That's a great way to do it. They equip you. They trust you. Well, let's stop on this. How do you know someone trusts you? Because it's easy to say, oh, well, you should trust people. They give you responsibility, but they don't just give you responsibility. How do you know someone trusts you when they give you responsibility? They get out of your way. They don't hover. They let you do that thing. What else did you notice these leaders do? They edify. What a beautiful word. Yeah, they edify you. And what do you mean by edify?
They'll give you a compliment when you don't even, they'll give you a compliment on something small, like something that's not even big.
Yeah, they might go kind of nuts on some little thing that you did. Yeah. What else do? They provide you with the tools for success. And like they think you can handle those tools. They respect you.
Challenge you.
How do you know someone respects you?
It's kind of back to that trust thing. If they trust you, they respect you.
Yeah, they give you responsibility. Now, maybe one sign that someone respects you is that they challenge you. Okay, now one of the things we noticed about these multiplier leaders is they had an interesting duality. Now, it doesn't surprise you, this contrast between the diminishers and the multipliers, right? Not a big surprise. What was surprising to me is that there was this dual nature of these multiplier leaders. They had a side some people might call a soft side. They respect, they empower, they trust, they edify, they listen, they value, they enable, they empower, yes. And then there was another side. My publisher calls it, she saw the manuscript for the first time and she wrote back, and among a bunch of things she said, she's like, wow, wow, wow. These are not cupcakes and kisses kinds of leaders. They have a hard edge. I bet lots of you have had leaders with a hard edge. It's like that trust, empowerment, respect is a table stake to just be in that relationship. But what do you do once you trust and respect someone? You hold them accountable. You might give them some tough love. And it's, I think, why so many of us love Bill Campbell. It's why I love being part of his legacy and sharing with others some of the things he shared with me. Yeah, they hold people accountable. They have high expectations. They give candid, hard feedback. They don't withhold information from you that you need to hear. Like you're not doing it right. This work isn't good enough. And they challenge. How much of your capability did your multiplier leader get from you? So what was the average of your group? Elliot, can we ask you to do this job one more time? Okay. 94. 88. 98. 92. 92 and a half, okay? 95. 85. 91. 99. 90. 95, 84, 94, 96, and 90 and 92. Elliot, do your thing. Thank you. So now let's get inside the head of this multiplier leader just a little bit. What did your multiplier believe to be true? What we're looking for is the core assumption that they're operating under. See, because everything we do as a leader flows from a belief. What did he or she believe to be true? That they can always get better? Yeah. That everyone can contribute. You know, we heard both of those mindsets just rolling off the stage here listening to Steve and Ronnie, didn't we? What else did they believe? They believed that it's good to make mistakes, that it's an imperfect path toward perfection, to getting something right. They believed that you were valuable, that they can learn from those under them, that they should build others up, that that's their fundamental job. And it's not just to build people up, like it's part of, I think, where some of our mindset around leadership falls short, like we're to there build and grow others. I would add to it, and use every bit of their capability. It's not just about me being selfless as a leader and wanting to build and grow you. I actually see your capability and I want it. I want it, and I'm going to use it. And I'm going to put it to use at the highest point I can, on the hardest problems, on our most important work. And why is that a good gig? To be fully utilized? We talked about it. Like it's to have a sense of purpose, fulfilling. Elliot, what did you find? 92. 95 is what I found in the research. Let me share with you kind of a sum up of what we found. There is a summary of this on your first page of your handout. What we found is that it really begins from these mindsets that these leaders hold. The diminisher tends to hold a mindset that nobody, and it's not that they think no one else is smart. That the mindset tends to be that no one is going to figure it out without me. I am needed. Other people can't do it without me. I need to be in the meeting. I need to be in the room. Like they won't get it done if I leave. And a whole set of behaviors tends to cascade from this. The multiplier tends to hold a very different assumption. Their assumption, I did dozens and dozens of interviews on this trying to understand what is the mindset that they hold, and it came down to something pretty simple, but powerful. The mindset is they believe that people are smart and can figure it out. Okay, now how do you lead when you believe the people around you, the people on your team, or the people that you are responsible for, if you believe they're smart and they can figure it out, what do? You cultivate, you encourage, you turn them loose. Yeah, what do you not have to do a lot of? You don't have to do a lot of micromanaging. Micromanaging was the #1 word that came up for diminishers. They micromanage. If you are in micromanaging mode, you are almost certainly having a diminishing effect. Even if you're doing it to save a life. And there might be times, we're going to talk about times when you might need to micromanage. We find that here's what these leaders do very differently. The first is how they manage talent. The diminisher tends to be an empire builder. They love talent. They love smart people. They love acquiring smart, talented people. They're all about the recruiting of talent. But what's that talent there for? In some ways, for show. My guess is that everyone has like a grandma with a knick-knack cabinet, right? Like a curio cabinet. Everyone have one? I have one. I've like become the lady with the knick-knack cabinet. And it's like talent becomes like little knick-knacks in grandma's curio cabinet, sort of there for others to see, but not to be used. See, they underutilize the talent that they acquire. You know, companies, and particularly right here in Silicon Valley, they're obsessed with hiring the best and the brightest. But then they forget to keep asking, are we using them to the extent we hired them? It's amazing how quickly managers forget that they hired someone who was brilliant. The first is how they manage talent, that empire builder versus the multiplier, who tends to be a talent magnet. They're more than just a talent scout. It's about how they use people. They see genius and talent in others. I call it native genius. We're going to talk about it a little bit later this morning. What people do easily, what they do freely, they see it, they use it, they put it to work, and it's a pretty good day at work when people see what you are uniquely good at. They use it, they stretch it, they grow it, they celebrate it. Like most of us want to work in that place. The second is the kind of environment they create, the culture that they create around them. The diminisher tends to be the tyrant, and they're not always the yelling, chair-throwing, hot-headed tyrant. They're leaders who exude stress. What happens, Brendan, you're in medicine, what happens to our brains when we're experiencing anxiety and stress? It doesn't work to its full potential. We have that amygdala hijack, the part of our brain that does critical thinking, analysis, trade-offs, handles dilemmas. It shuts down. Once it reboots, it takes 18 minutes for that part of our brain to start working again. And so some of you know, like, yeah, no, I've had that hijack where suddenly I can't think around that person. It takes you 18 minutes to get, like, once they leave, to get that back. Now, the multiplier tends to be a liberator. Shawn used that term earlier today. They're liberators. They create space for people to do their best work. They create an environment that's not tense. They create an environment that's intense, one that demands your best thinking. The third difference is how they set direction. The diminisher tends to be a know-it-all. They set direction based on what they know, what they see. But rarely do they ask questions that they don't have answers to. They become like the lid of the organization. Whereas the multiplier, they tend to be a challenger. They ask people to do hard things. They ask people to explore new possibilities. They ask questions that not only does the other person not have answers to, yet they ask questions they don't have answers to. How do we do this? What is possible? And they stretch people. They're leaders who are comfortable inviting other people to be uncomfortable. The fourth is how they make decisions, where the diminisher tends to be the decision maker. They make the decisions fast in an inner circle, and then they spend their time selling their decisions to others. But what's it like when someone comes to you and wants your buy-in on a decision you know has already been made? What's the reaction? Yeah, you know, they end up leaving other people debating long after the decision is made, whereas the multiplier tends to be a debate maker, not constantly having debate, not constantly debating, but on the most vital decisions, the decisions that will affect the course of an organization, the strategic decisions, the important decisions. That's where they bring the right people together. They frame the issue. They ask the question. They let people debate. They let people weigh in, not with like a polite discussion, but a hard-hitting debate. In the end, they're often the final decision maker, but they've led that debate in a way that the underbelly is exposed, that people have had a chance to have voice, to weigh in, to have their ideas count and register, and we find that in that process, they generate all the buy-in they need. And lastly, the diminisher tends to be micromanagers when it comes to getting things done. And that requires no explanation. The multiplier tends to be an investor. They give other people ownership. They give them accountability. They put other people in charge. When I was doing the research, I was talking to someone named Doug Allred, lives not too far from here. He told me that when he went to work for John Chambers. Now, John Chambers was the CEO of Cisco Corporation for a lot of years. A lot of you probably have Cisco routers and things. John was hiring his very first vice president into Cisco. So he's the new CEO. He's hiring his very first executive that he's bringing in. He hires Doug. Doug's going to run customer support. It's mission critical to their strategy as a firm. And he says to Doug, when it comes to this part of the business, meaning customer support, he says, you get 51% of the vote and all the accountability that comes with that. Now, what has he said to Doug by giving him 51% of the vote? You're in charge. You're in control. He's giving him the ownership, but what has he also said to him? He didn't give him 100% of the vote. He gave him 51% of the vote. What goes with that? You have 51% of the vote, which means I have 49. Meaning, come ask me my opinion. Listen to me as your boss. Keep me informed. I want to participate, but you know what? When it comes down to it, you own it. I don't know a better way to put someone else in charge by saying, you know what? On this decision, you get 51% of the vote. And we find they get this very different effect from people around them. It's a 2x effect. We also find that we can end up becoming diminishers totally unaware. I was so impressed when I heard, does anyone know who this is? This is sort of Magic Johnson, but it's not really Magic Johnson. He's playing for the Vikings. He's a young man in high school. This is Irvin Johnson Jr. Okay, so a lot of you know him as Magic Johnson, an incredible athlete, incredible businessman, franchise owner. I want you to go back to when he is in high school. He's a young man. he's a total phenom as an athlete. Now, could you imagine being his coach? Could you imagine playing on his team? Okay, he had an experience as a young high school kid that really shaped the way that he led. His coach said something to him. His coach said, Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to, what would it be? Yeah, like there's not a lot of dunking happening back then. I mean, I get you with the dunking, but like let's go back. This is like mid-70s. Okay, what does his coach say to him? It affects him as a leader forever, this experience. His coach says, Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to pass it or shoot. Which is it? Which is it? His coach said, Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to take the shot. Right? That's what a coach would say, right? So he did. And he scores a lot of points. Now, the coach is pretty happy about this because he's this really, not only is he a talented kid, he's a coachable kid. Coach is happy. Now, the other players are happy. Why are they happy? They're winning. They win every game. They are undefeated. They are undefeated. And this is going on game after game. They would win with, let's say, like 54 points, but Irvin would have scored 50 or 52 of those points. Okay, but it's like win after win after win. This is working. And it comes to a particular game. There's nothing special about this game. It's not a playoff game. It's just a game. Game's over. They win. Players are celebrating. The celebrations come to an end. The players are now leaving the gymnasium, headed to the parking lot with their parents. And young Irvin sees the faces of their parents. And it like wounds him. Because what does he see? Yeah, see, those players came there to see what? Their kid play. And what did they get? Yeah, the Irvin show. It was like an early version of Laker Showtime Magic. You know, that's what they got to see. And it affects him. And he made a decision as a player. And his decision, he makes it as a very young man. He says, and he tells me this, he says, I made a decision that I would use my God-given talent to help everyone on the team be a better player. It was actually this orientation, which for him was a reorientation, that earned him this nickname of Magic. Is his moniker given to him by a Michigan sports writer who said, like, this player is just like magic. He raises the level of play for every team he plays on. See, and I think it captures the essence of being a multiplier leader. It's not like he had this effect on his team by playing small. If anyone has ever seen him play, seen any footage of this, you know he played huge. He took a lot of shots. He scored a lot of shots. Or made a lot of shots. But he didn't just do this on the sidelines. He didn't do this by just cheering for everyone else. He didn't do it by just passing. He played big, but he played in a way that allowed others to be big, which is, I think, the essence of being a multiplier. It's not about saying, oh, my job is just to sort of use the capability of people on the team. It's like, no, bring all of your own intelligence, all of your own talent, but do it in a way that there is room for talent of others. I think it also illustrates the ways that we can end up what I call an accidental diminisher. See, we find that a lot of the diminishers and a lot of the deep diminishing effect in our organizations is not coming from the yelling, chair throwing, in your face, you're an idiot kind of diminisher. Most of the diminishing is coming from the well-intended leader. It's like when you're, so in the research, it's like, you know when you're watching a movie and then you get to that point in the movie where you realize that the good guys might be the bad guys in the movie? Okay, so there's a moment like this where I'm realizing most of the diminishing is coming from the good guys. Most of it is coming from the well-intended leaders who have no idea that actually they're diminishing with the best of intentions. Much like magic. All he's doing was doing what he was asked. He's just playing big, not realizing he wasn't creating any room for others to play big. So here's what I want us to do. Up until we take a break in about 15 minutes or so, I want you to just entertain with me this question of how might I be having a diminishing impact on the people I work with. And for some of you, on family members. I know some of you are husbands, fathers. Some of you do work with youth. Some of you, I know, are probably pastors in your community. How might you be having a diminishing effect with the very best of intentions? That's a question we're going to answer. I think about this question just about every day of my life. Here's what I want to do. We're going to explore 9 ways that we can end up accidentally diminishing. What I want you to do is pick one. Just pick one of these. Okay, so the first is one that I struggle with, the idea guy. Now, I'm an idea guy. I'm a massive idea guy. Everyone on my team knows this about me. I love creative thinking. I love creative environments. Like the idea guy, like we come into the office bursting with ideas. Hey, what about this? Have you thought about that? Like maybe we should try this. And of course, we think our ideas are doing what? Helping, stimulating. Like we are getting the party started, right, with our ideas. We're sparking ideas. This is our intention. The picture you're going to see on the right is the impact it tends to have on others. What's it like to work for the idea guy? Some of you are like, that is a typical day in my office, right? Because what do? To others, we cause them like to chase. Okay, Liz has got me doing this. Now she's got me doing that. Now I'm over here. And people learn to do what? Stay put. And just say, this is where I end up at the end of every day. I'll just stay here and wait for the fountain of ideas to go off. And I'll get my ideas from her. Okay, some of you may be an idea guy. Some of you may be what I call always on. This is a person who is always contributing, always something to say, bringing the energy. Woo! Like bringing it on a team. And you think, of course, that your energy is helping, contagious, infectious. Like, woo! Come on, this is great. I'm having a great time. This is going to be amazing. What's it like to work for the always on leader? It's exhausting. Yeah, it's like this is what it feels like. They're draining. They're killing us with all this energy. What do we tend to do when we see the always on leader walking down the hallway toward our office? There's a universal reaction to this. What is it? Yeah, I think this little video captures it. Or what about the rescuer? Big-hearted leader does not like to see people struggle or suffer or make mistakes. When we see our buddies failing, what do?
I'll step in and fix it.
I'll step in and fix it. And sometimes it's like I'll do it heroically, like da-da-da, here I am, saving the day. But often it's just extending a hand of help. But what happens when the boss is helpful too early or too often? We don't learn. Nobody learns. Like we've just crushed that learning cycle. And you know what we've done? We've not only like arrested that cycle for someone else, we have stolen it for ourselves. Like who's doing the learning during the rescue? Yeah, so like this is your narrative. I am helping, I am rescuing. What's happening for the other person? What's their experience like? That's more what it's like to be rescued. Or what about the pace setter? This is the achievement-oriented leader who loves to accomplish hard things. This is the leader who's leading by example. How many times have we been told to lead by example? Okay, a lot, all our lives. It's some bad advice. When it comes to morals and ethics, it's really good advice. But when it comes to heroics, it's really bad advice. So, okay, hey, you know what? We're really focusing on innovation. I am going to model that. Or we want to really get like more intimate with our customers and really understand our customers. I'm going to like run around and spend time with our customers. Other people will see what I'm doing, like modeling the values of the organization. They will see it and they will follow. But what happens when the leader gets out ahead of his team? You end up leaving people behind. When you lead by setting the pace, you are more likely to create spectators than followers. Which of these would you say would be the manager in this situation? Yeah, people are like, hey, let me know if you need help next time you lap me. Like, you're working really hard, but nobody else is. They're watching you do your thing. Or what about the rapid responder? This is the leader who's on it. Like, they want to build an agile, quick, responsive team, so they respond. See a text, answer a text. It's like see a bear, shoot a bear kind of logic. You think you're creating the agility, but this is really the experience of people around you. Or what about the optimist? This is the positive can-do leader. I struggle with this one. And it's not that I struggle for a lack of optimism. I'm bursting with optimism. I've got what Carol Dweck, who's got an office like literally probably 100 yards from here, it's what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. Hey, we can do this. We can do hard things. Like, we're going to win. Like, I envision the victory. You would think that would be very helpful for a leader to do, wouldn't you? I would. What do you think it's like to work for someone who sees the upside, who sees the victory, who sees the possibilities? See, what do we overlook? I had a colleague say to me, he goes, Liz, I need you. We are working on an important piece of research, tight deadlines, really difficult analytics. And we're right at the end of the project. And he said, Liz, I need you to stop saying that. I said, saying what? He goes, oh, that thing you say all the time. I don't know what it was I said all the time, but he was super happy to tell me about this. It's like he'd been waiting months to say this to me. And he goes, oh, you know, that thing you say all the time. I'm like, do tell. He goes, oh, we can do this. This can't be that hard. I'm like, oh, I do say that all the time. This can't be that hard, right? That's like a growth mindset, isn't it? And I said, oh, that's me saying, hey, I think we can do hard things, that we're smart and we can figure it out. He goes, yeah, that is the thing I need you to stop saying. I'm like, why? And then he describes this. He says, Liz, because what we're doing is hard. It's hard what we're doing. And as my boss, I need you to acknowledge this. And he's like, Liz, say it's hard. And I'm like, and I've learned to do that. I've learned to signal the struggle. I've learned to say to people I work with, like, what we're doing is really hard. We're probably going to make some mistakes. I've learned to say things like, you know what, we might fail at this. And it's funny, once I signal the struggle, people are like, okay, you can go ahead and say it. Because I'm like, oh, but how hard can it be? We can do this. But he's like, I need you to stop saying that. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I can stop saying that because what is my optimist brain saying in that very moment? I can change. I can stop saying that because how hard can that be? Turns out changing some of this is a little bit hard. Or what about the overly protective leader who is shielding their people from difficulties, from politics, from bad players in the organization, so to speak? And they're like a banyan tree. They provide comfort, they provide shade. But what's the problem with the banyan tree? Yeah, nothing grows under the banyan tree. People don't grow under these kind of protective leaders. Or the strategist, the big, bold thinker who does so much of the big thinking that they leave other people to do the little thinking. They can't figure out why people are working in silos. You know, in little tiny pieces because they're doing the big thinking. Or the perfectionist. This is the last of the 9. And you know if you've got perfectionist tendencies. Like you love the A+. You love getting it right. You love doing it right. It feels so good to you. What you probably don't understand is what it's like to work for you. Have you ever thought about what it's like to work for you? If you've got perfectionist tendencies? Yeah, this is what it feels like to work for you. I hear people say this a lot about these kind of leaders. They're like, nothing I did was ever good enough for her. And what do people learn to do? If you do the rework, people learn not to try. Okay, so the question is, what might be your diminishing tendency? Again, all of these are ways that we diminish with the very, very best of intentions. Would you have a look and pick one? And there is a little sheet. It looks like this. kind of summed up a lot of what I've learned about this multiplier leadership and becoming more of a multiplier in this simple little chart. The columns are each of the accidental diminisher tendencies. Maybe you go and circle the one that might be a vulnerability for you. And then you look down those rows, use those yellow check marks to see which of these multiplier practices would actually help you to turn an otherwise diminishing dynamic into a multiplier moment. Would you take a minute to pick one? And for those of you who found your accidental diminisher tendency fast and you know what your multiplier practice is right away, maybe you can take a moment to identify what tends to trigger it. What's happening when you go into diminishing mode? What triggers the rescue? What triggers the victory speech about, hey, this can't be that hard? And then will you find 2 other people that you might be able to chat through this with? And what I want you to do is I want you to simply share your accidental diminisher tendency with. Now, Ronnie Lott gave an invitation to everyone. He said, hey, huddle up with someone and talk to them about one of your weaknesses. Hey, this counts for that, okay? For some of you are like, oh, how am I going to do that? That's an awkward social exchange. I'm going to make that a little less awkward for you because what you're doing is you're going to talk about something that might be a leadership weakness, but you're doing it with the very best of intentions. Maybe you're doing it out of love. We're going to ask you to do it 5 minutes, then we're going to take like a 5-minute bio break when we're done with that. So share your accidental diminisher tendency, what tends to trigger it, why you do it, what you're going to do instead. Do that in a group of 3 people. Take about 5 minutes to do that, 5 minutes on bio break, and we are going to start up 5 minutes after. Okay, why don't we regroup. Now, who in the last 10 minutes discovered an accidental diminisher tendency that you didn't know about, but is actually kind of good to know about now? Anyone discover one for themselves? Anyone want to share it? Okay, good. What's yours?
Mine was being a rescuer.
Rescuer, big heart,
Yes.
love people.
Yeah, for my homeboy, my best friend. And we had the same major, and like I was more into it as far as working wise. He was like kind of lazy, so like I used to like compromise for him in class, like help him out. But the teachers, they used to tell me like it wasn't good, even though because it was my homeboy, I didn't want to feel it.
Yeah, kind of doing things for him. Yeah, like me, I had a roommate who was an English major who didn't type.
Yeah.
And guess who typed all her papers for her? Yeah. Guess who can't type now? My roommate. Yeah. She's a professor of English too, who still struggles to type. Okay. Anyone else have an accidental diminisher tendency? They just want to shout it out. And I'm giving you this opportunity right now because it doesn't actually get any easier than this. See, we find that organizations that build a multiplier culture and people who become multiplier leaders, it's not that they talk about their multiplier ways. What they do is they talk about their diminisher ways. They have open conversations. They know about it. They're like, I'm a total idea guy, so this is what I do to deal with that, to work around that. Anyone want to just shout theirs out just for practice? Rapid responder. Optimist. With you. Rescuer. Pace setter. Perfectionist. Strategist. Protector. Perfectionist. Have a conversation with the people you work with. Talk about your accidental diminisher tendencies. And maybe even say, here's what I'm going to try to do differently. What I want us to do is to, we're going to forget that music here. It was just in case we had a hard time getting y'all back. I want to, I want to just focus on maybe 3 multiplier practices. 3 practices that can help you be more of a multiplier. I picked 3 of the big ones, some of the popular ones, some that turn out to be remedies to a number of accidental diminisher tendencies. Each one of these is a shift. Each one of them should be something that's a little uncomfortable, a stretch, an uncomfortable shift. Now, some of you might recognize this picture. Who recognizes this photo? What's it from? Yeah. Yeah, back in 1974, there was a crazy French tightrope artist named Philippe Petit, who was possessed with this idea of walking without a net, without a harness, across these very tall structures. This is back when he, in the then standing World Trade Towers, where he surreptitiously, he and his crew, surreptitiously strung this cable between the then standing towers, and he walked across it, no net, no harness, just man on wire, which is what the documentary was called. It's a famous picture. And he actually, what was so interesting is not just that he did it, he was out there on this cable for 40 minutes. Because once he got out on the cable, he was actually quite comfortable. He was sort of in his element. He knew what to do. What was the hard part? The first step was hard. And this is a picture I love. That's the famous picture. That's my picture. That's the one. No, I didn't take that picture. That's just like my jam picture. That's the picture that speaks to me. It's him taking a step. And I heard him describe what it was like to take the first step. And he said, well, it was kind of a moment of truth. He's standing there on the cable. So he's on the cable. He's on the edge of the building. So his back foot is still over the building, kind of where it's safe. And he's got his front foot on the cable, which is over the expanse. This is 1,500 feet down. And he's standing there, and he has all of his weight on his back foot. And somebody asked him this question, how did you get yourself out there? And he said, well, I stood there with all my weight on my back foot, and I had to make a decision. And the decision was, do I shift my weight? And he said something really called him out on the wire, and it would not call to you or me, but it calls to him. And he says, I made a decision to shift my weight. That was the decision. And so now he's got his weight on his front foot. What happens next? Like, you just kind of can't help but do the next one. And then the next step comes, and then he's comfortable, and then he's out on this wire, and he's playing, and he's entertaining the people that are below. Each one of the things that we're going to talk about for the next probably 30 minutes on this is a shift of weight. I'm comfortable doing it this way. Let me just take an uncomfortable small step forward. Now, the very first shift I want to talk about is, I think it's the most profound shift that a leader can make. And that is shifting out of the mode of telling and operating in the mode of asking. Asking the questions that focus the intelligence and energy of your team on the right problem. It's asking the questions that shift the burden of thinking from you, and it shares that sweet burden with the rest of your team. Because again, people come into work every day desperately wanting to give 100% of their intelligence. People want to do hard work. They want to be smart. Tim Brown, the CEO of IDEO, who is a major player in the design, the D School here at Stanford, famously innovative, creative, brilliant leader, said, as leader, probably the most important role we play is asking the right questions and focusing on the right problems. If you're focusing on the wrong questions, you're not really providing the leadership you should. Meaning that it is the leader's job to ask the questions and invite other people to find answers. And our most important job is asking the right questions, the ones that focus the energy and intelligence of our team. I'm going to ask you to take the Extreme Question Challenge. Before I explain that, I want to explain where the Extreme Question Challenge came from. Now, this was not something I invented. It was actually a challenge that I received. And it was a challenge that I received unwittingly and from a sort of a unwitting colleague about, 16 years ago. I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. I'm also a football mom. And this was about 17 years ago, and I don't have 4 kids, and I just have 3 kids. and like a mere 3 kids. But they're ages 6, 4, and 2. So I have a little brood of young kids. Now, I know some of you have kids. Anyone have the 6, 4, 2 combo pack at your house? Okay, so some of you understand what this is like. So I've got this big job at home, and I have kind of a big job at work, too. I'm an executive at Oracle. I run the university for Oracle, a bunch of other big global things. But that job is nothing compared to my job as mom. And I'm talking to my buddy Brian at work, and I'm explaining to him, I said, you know, honestly, I don't feel like I'm being a very good parent right now because I'm constantly telling my kids what to do. I'm like just bossing them around. I'm like a little dictator in my house. I'm like, I feel like I've become the bossy mom. And Brian, who's got lots of savvy, he also had 2 young daughters at the time. He said, Liz, you don't strike me as the bossy mom type. I'm like, oh, really? Well, let me explain this to you. So I had to choose a time of day, a moment to explain to him. So for those of you who have the 642 combo pack, what would you pick? What time of day? Bedtime. That's what I explained to him. I'm like, let me just tell you how bedtime goes at our house. I'm like, kids, time for bed. Put that away. Leave her alone. Come brush your teeth. Go get your pajamas on. Okay, no, they're inside out. Like, that tag does not go in the front. Tag goes in the back, you know. Okay, story time. Get a book. No, not 5 books. Give me 1 book. No princess books. No princess books. Okay, wait a minute. No big books. Just give me a little book about this big. Like, with thick pages, cardboard pages, low word count, you know, good night moon, that's good, that'll work. Okay, story time, done. Say your prayers. Into bed, not her bed, your bed, not my bed, your bed, back to bed. You know, and no, you're hydrated, you're good, come on, go to sleep. And so there's no yelling. There's no yelling in this, but it's just a constant stream of telling. And it's not working very well. And so Brian offers a little bit of coaching. But I wasn't looking for coaching. See, what he didn't understand is this was recreational complaining. But he offers a little bit of coaching, and he goes, Liz, why don't you try to just go home tonight? Why don't you go home and just ask questions? Like, what if you just asked questions to your kids? And I interpreted that very literally. Like, wow, could I ask, what if I asked nothing but questions? And my first reaction was, imposible. I can't do that. That's ridiculous. Like, I'm going to be home around 6. They don't go to bed till 9:30. That's like 3.5 hours. And Brian said something annoying like, yeah, I know that would probably be hard. I said, I like hard. I think I'll try that. And so I decided I would go home. And the moment I walked in the front door, it would be nothing but questions. I had to like summon strength to do this. You know how like when you sit outside your house, like for those of you who have little kids, you know, you're like, I'm going in. And so I go in, we get through dinner just fine. I'm asking questions, playtime's fine. We get to bedtime, the witching hour, right? And I got nothing but questions. Like, what would you ask? Yeah. I start asking questions. Now, I don't start with the question that kills this, which is, hey, who's ready for bed? Because I'll tell you the answer that a 6, 4, and 2-year-old give to that. You know that answer. Like, nope, not me. I'm just getting started for the night. Yeah, so I start with, kids, what time is it? They knew. Like the 6-year-old knew. Think about how many data points she had that told her that when it's dark, we go to bed. Like she knew what time it was. So like, it's bedtime. What do we do at first? Where do those toys need to be put away? Okay, who needs help getting their pajamas on? Who's going to be the first one to get their teeth brushed tonight? Okay, whose turn is it to pick the story? What story are we going to read? Whose turn is it to read the story, mommy or daddy? And then I was like, okay, what do we do after story time? They're like, well, Mom, we say prayer. Like, okay, wow, little angels. And then the question was, after we prayed, the question was, okay, who's ready for bed? And then it was, oh, me. And what was chaos the night before was now this competition, who could get to bed first. They got in their beds. They stay in their beds. They go to sleep on their own. And I'm left standing in the hallway, like we have this landing that connects the various rooms. And I'm standing there wondering, like, how long have they known how to do this, right? Because it didn't seem like they knew last night, which is why I did it for them. But I learned that when I asked the questions, it gave them a chance to find the answers. And it turned out they could do a lot of things that I had been doing for them. They knew where their plates went after dinner. They knew where their backpack should be hung up. I learned to ask questions. I kept this up for 3 nights, so fascinated by what was happening. It changed me for certain as a parent, changed me forever. It also has changed me as a leader. I've learned that my job is to ask the questions. I call this little exercise the Extreme Question Challenge. I want everyone here to take it. And what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you pair up. So no threes, just 2 people. And we're going to do 2 rounds of this. And one of you is going to be the multiplier. One of you will be the colleague. You're going to respond. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to pick a topic that you both know something about. You get like 10 seconds to find your topic, so don't overcomplicate this. Pick a partner, pick a topic. One of you is going to go first for sake of time. I just suggest the person with the longest hair goes first, okay? Here's what I want you to do. You're going to find your partner. You're going to pick your topic. You know what? Why don't you find your partner and a topic, stand up when you're ready to go, and then I'm going to explain these instructions really fast. Just partner, topic, who's first, stand up when you're ready. Let me explain the challenge. If you are playing the role of multiplier, raise your hand so I know who my people are. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. So this first night, I took the challenge for 3.5 hours. I'm going to ask you to do it for 2 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to lead the conversation. Find out what your colleague knows about this topic. I want you to have a point of view of your own. And feel free to bring that into the conversation. But I'm going to ask you to do it by only asking questions. You are not going to make any statements like, oh, good idea. That's nice. How interesting. Everything has a question mark. And I tell you, I have developed a skill over the years is I can smell when people are asking questions like, don't you agree with me? Right? Like, I will find you if you ask a question like that. So you are going to ask nothing but questions. It's hard. Do you see how, like, I'm countering my own optimism there? What I'm asking you to do is hard. If you are the colleague, I want you to respond. Your job is simply to keep your answer short for the purpose of making the other person suffer just a little bit. Okay, we want to give them a chance to work and to ask questions. Keep your ideas crisp, short. Does everyone know what you need to do? We're going to do 2 rounds of it, so everyone's going to get a chance to do this. And nothing but questions, go. Wherever you are in the conversation, when you were asking questions, what was it like to ask nothing but questions just for 2 minutes? It was liberating. Liberating, thank you. It should be liberating. Most people say, wow, being a multiplier, it's harder, maybe emotionally and from a discipline standpoint, but it's actually an easier job and a way better job. What else was it? It was liberating. It was informative. It worked. Yeah, what I'm asking you to do is unnatural as a leader, to ask nothing but questions. But it's not nearly as uncomfortable for the others as you might think. Now, I am in no way suggesting that you go forth and lead by only asking questions. It would be creepy, okay? And like, if you do it, do not blame it on me, okay? But what I'm saying is maybe you take this challenge like I took it, which is pick a meeting, a conversation, a customer visit, a team meeting, and you try just, could I lead it with nothing but questions? Maybe try it once, twice, maybe 3 times. Now, if you think you're going to freak people out, what should you do? No, just tell them what you're up to. Yeah, like you don't have to have like some clandestine approach. All you need to do is say, I'm going to take a little different role in this meeting. I mean, you could say, hey, you know, Liz made me do this, whatever, but you just need to say, I'm going to take a different role. And I'm going to say less, but I want to ask more questions and find out what the team knows about this. Maybe you take this experiment once or twice or 3 times. I promise you it will be hard. I promise you it will be interesting, and it might just change you forever as a leader. And then you can kind of dial it back to normal human levels of conversation. I find I tend to go into extreme question mode when something really bad has happened, and I go into extreme question mode strangely when something really good has happened. So I don't end up taking over somebody else's success. Maybe I just ask them about the win, about what went well. Second practice is maybe you learn to identify the native genius of the people you work with. This is Larry Gelwix, one of my favorite multiplier leaders. He coaches, he's retired now, he coaches high school rugby, the Highland High School rugby team. His team has won 19 national championships. Over his 27-year career, he's a volunteer coach, by the way, a high school volunteer coach. They have won 410 times and lost 10. I think he's considered, I think Fox News declared him the most winning coach in America. He said, I'm not trying to build a champion team. Strangely, he has. I'm trying to raise champion boys. That's what I'm doing. He demands they're intelligent off the field and on the field. One of his players, Shawn, who played for him for a number of years, said, you know, there was just this one practice where Coach Gelwix just said, John, we've got you in this position because you're fast and we need your speed. Now, John had always seen himself as a good athlete, but he had never really defined himself as a fast athlete. Well, you know what happened. In practice, he worked on his speed. And in game times, you know what it is when you need just a little bit more speed. He always found it, became one of the fastest players. And he said, it's because Coach declared me fast, and he declared it in front of people around me. See, he helped John see his native genius. Native genius is what people do easily and freely. What does it look like when someone does something easily? They do it effortlessly. They do it with fun. It's relaxed. They do it well. It's performance that tends to flow from them. What is it like when people do something freely? They do it without fear of making a mistake. They do it without being prompted. They do it without being asked. They just do it. They often do it without recognition, without compensation, without a lot of instruction. Like when you find out what people do freely and easily, what their native genius is, what happens? What happens when people work within their native genius? They work better. Lots of good things happen when people work within their native genius. I'm going to ask you to identify your native genius. My goal is when that Multipliers 201 group comes back, they're going to come back and they're going to have badges. And the competitor in me wants to have badges as well. So we're going to pass out. I've put some badges down in each one of these sections if you want to pass these back. And this is my badge, and it has in here what I consider and what most of my colleagues consider to be, I don't know that I can even peel that. Oh, there we go. What people consider to be my native genius. People are like, Liz, your native genius is that you are a synthesizer. Like I just take in a lot of data and a lot of noise, and I don't know, like my mind just simplifies it. People say, you know what, if we had to give you a superhero name, it might be like can of worms to bullet points. That's just kind of what your mind does. And it's been this way across my whole career. What I want you to do is I want you to start with what is it that my mind does easily and freely? And there's a handout in here with something like that. And then I want you to label it. Like for me, I would say I'm a synthesizer. And then I might even give it a superhero name like can of worms to bullet points. And then I might start to think about what are ways that I can use this native genius. I use it as a researcher. I use it as a facilitator. It's just what I do. Let me give you a quick example of this because I'm going to ask you to do it. So I picked someone that I thought everyone here would know. Oprah Winfrey. I want you to imagine you have Oprah Winfrey working for you in your company. What would you do if Oprah Winfrey was a new coming frontline employee in your company? If you had like a young Oprah Winfrey? So I kind of put a little bit, would you freak out? Yeah, I kind of put like, here's what I think her native genius is. And when I look at what she does, you know, what comes easily to her, she puts people at ease. She empathizes. She connects with others. She builds relationship. If I had to put a label on that, I would say she is good at connecting with people. She's a connector. Now, if I had to give her a superhero name for Oprah Winfrey's native genius, I might say she is the universal BFF. Let's say you have the universal BFF working in your company. What could you do with that? She'd make a pretty good customer support rep, wouldn't she? Well, you know, she'd probably be a pretty good customer support manager, too. Well, you know, what if you put her on one of your biggest accounts? That would be pretty amazing. What if you made her a global account and gave her like the biggest global account? You know what? She'd probably, maybe using her native genius at its highest might be to have her as your corporate spokesperson. Could you imagine having Oprah Winfrey as your corporate spokesperson? This is a thought process that I want you to go down for yourself. And I want you to start. There's a handout that looks like this, and you can use that to kind of work up to this. And it's on page, Hank, what page is it on? Page 55. You can do that, or if you kind of know, you can go right to tag. My hope is that when this group comes in about 7 minutes, we all have a badge on that says, this is my native genius. It's just the thing I do. I'm going to ask you to take a minute, jot down some ideas, or go straight to tag if you want. Here's what I'd love to have you do. Would you turn to a neighbor, one other person, or a group of 3 if you need to, and would you share with them, here's my native genius, and maybe talk about 3 ways that this gets used. And feel free to have one of those be a fantasy way, meaning which is, I'd love to do this kind of work because it would deeply utilize my native genius. And I'm going to ask you to do that in 2 minutes, 1 minute per person. Here's my native genius. If you're like, I don't know what to put on my tag, you are not alone. What I want you to do is just talk through with your partner. Here's kind of what I'm good at. And if you're that person's partner, help them get something that they might be able to put on their tag, okay? You got it? A minute for each person. What's your native genius? How could it be used? And go. Okay, if you are still on person number 1, switch to person number 2. You've got about 30 more seconds. I want to make sure both people get a chance to share their native genius. Go. Okay, let me ask you to pause your conversation. My hope is that some of you will put your native genius on your badge. It'll be a point of conversation throughout the remainder of the day. If you don't know it, use this opportunity for someone to help you see it. Now, when I first wrote the book and had this idea of native genius, I imagined that managers would take quiet moments in their office to think about the native genius of people who work for them. And then they might have a conversation like, hey, you know what, you are so good at building bridges. We're going to give you this piece of work. Like that managers would think and have one-on-one conversations with people in their native genius. And then I got an email note from these guys, co-founders of a company called Blue Wire Media in Australia, and they said, hey, Liz, you know that native genius thing? It's changed our company. And we did it exactly like you said, and it was totally brilliant. And then they described what they did, and it was nothing like I had said. But it was totally brilliant. Because what they said is, we actually just pulled our whole team together. We got everyone in our company around a conference table. They were a small company of about 12 people at the time. And they said, we just went person by person and talked about each person's native genius. They defined it, what they do easily, freely. They gave people a criteria, and they said, okay, Marcus, what's Marcus's native genius? Everybody weigh in. And soon they're talking about what Marcus is brilliant at. And then they give Marcus a chance to defend himself at the end, which is, okay, here's kind of how I see it. And they're like, okay, Marcus, you're going to be the go-to guy. Like, that's the thing you do. And then they started even sharing it with the clients. Every time they start a project, they're like, oh, here are the 5 people on your project team. Marcus is a go-to guy. Liz, she's a synthesizer. You know, you got Shawn on the team. He's like Mr. Mission Impossible. He said every time we shared that with clients, the projects went well because people knew how to use each other at their fullest. So maybe you start by just figuring out your own native genius and sharing it with your colleagues. Maybe you do this for the people who work for you. Maybe you pull your whole team together to do it. Or maybe you take this challenge at its hardest. For those, I know there's some people in the room who love hard challenges. Here's one for you. Why don't you do it for the person on your team that you don't get? The person on your team who feels like a problem. The person on your team, you're not sure what they bring to the team. Or maybe just the person on a team whose mind is wired so differently than yours. I took this challenge. I took it with someone on my team who felt like a bit of a problem to me. This was my home team. This is my team at home. I have 4 kids. 3 of them seem perfectly normal to me. Okay? Then I have my son Christian, and he is different. He's different than the other kids. His mind is wired differently. Have you ever known, I'm sure he's why I'm a football mom. Have you known people who just don't have the fear gene? Like born without a sense of fear? Like just runs at danger? Like he lives by the motto of like, see it, climb it, figure out how to get done, you know, down when you're over. Like the football coach, big place, like, I can't get Christian to stop doing backflips off the bleachers during practice. Like, you know, and he's got this creative mind that just, like, think it, make it, clean up the mess, never, ever, ever, right? You know, this is this kid, and I brought, and it can be a bit of a challenge. I brought a picture of, he's just constantly making things. I brought a picture of one of his forts. Like, we lose everything in our house. Like, camping gear doesn't stay. Like, everything of value gets seconded into one of his creative projects. It's where we find all missing things. The problem with this fort, though, is not what's in his man fort. This is when he was probably about 13. It's where this thing is. Yeah, that's my roof, and that's a 2nd-story roof. Now, it's easy, so I want you to work with me on this. Our returner group is coming in. It's easy for me as his mother to look at this and see this as what? Josh says awesome, but he's very much not jiving with what I'm thinking right now. Okay, it's easy for me to see this as dangerous. Crazy, frustrating, stupid, problematic, potentially costly to himself, to us, to others. Yeah, he has things we do that we have to say, okay, we support you in this, but we don't want you to know these are like multi-million-dollar liabilities involved in some of the things that you're doing. And, you know, honestly, this was something for years that I thought needed to be stopped. Needed to be controlled. And I decided I would apply some multiplier logic to this, and instead of seeing any of this as a problem, I would simply look for what is his native genius, what's on his badge, what is his mind built to do, what is he brilliant at, what is he going to do whether I give him permission to do this or not. How do you think I see this kid today? I see him as a risk taker. I see him as fearless, bold, an innovator, a creator. I see him as absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it's changed our relationship. Maybe you pick the person on your team that seems a little bit like a problem, or the person you don't understand, and you find their native genius. Third is maybe you offer people not just work to do, and not just ownerships, maybe you offer people stretch challenges. Stretch challenges like when Matt McCauley, CEO of Gymboree, came into the organization, this children's clothing company, and he came in and saw that earnings per share were 59 cents a share, and he goes to the board and says, I think we could double it. Now, a corporate board would be thrilled to have a 10% increase in earnings per share. He says, I think we could double it. They thought he was crazy. He goes to his management team and he says, I have a mission impossible goal. $1 a share this fiscal year. That's my bar. It's my mission impossible goal. And he says to his team, what would we need to do to get to $1 a share? And soon the ideas start flowing, and soon everyone has a mission impossible goal. That year, they get to $1.19 a share. Matt's not done. Matt was a pole vaulter in college and in high school. He was a California state champion pole vaulter. And Matt told me, he said, I've always been fascinated by what's possible. He said, in practice, I always set 2 bars. The first was what I could clear, and then I set a higher bar. So he could clear like 17 feet and some inches. He set the higher bar at 20, the world record. He couldn't clear it, but he always wanted to know what's possible. After they get to this remarkable $1.19 a share, what does he do? Raises the bar. He says, I have a new mission impossible goal, $2 a share. What would we need to do to get that kind of efficiency and earnings? They hit $2.15 the next year. He then raises the bar to 3. They miss it that year. But the team doesn't give up. He doesn't give up. The year after, they get to $3.21 a share. I go talk to members of his team. I'm like, tell me about the miss. Like, I get that this is a 5x increase over a 4-year time period. Tell me about the miss. What was it like to miss? And they said, we weren't worried about missing, because if we made it, we were heroes. But if we missed, all it proved was that Matt was crazy. And we were perfectly willing to entertain it. Like, what might be a mission impossible goal for your team? What might be a mission impossible goal for this whole community? It could be something lofty, or it could be something like Shawn Mendy at the Boys and Girls Club down the street, who, when he met young Tatiana, who was living a very troubled life, and she kind of just walked past him into the clubhouse, he reached out and he grabbed her hand and he said, you know, when you shake someone's hand, you should do 3 things. You should give them a firm hand. This is a 13-year-old girl. Look them in the eye, and then up and down 3 times. That's a handshake. And she was taken back by this. But then he extended a series of small challenges to her. Oh, maybe you should take a journalism class in high school. What might you write a paper on for the school newspaper? Then she finds out what she really wants is to go to college. And he asks, what might you need to do to get there? What could we do? What could you do? She ended up getting into 5 elite high schools and then off to college. And it started with a small but concrete challenge, something that is an uncomfortable stretch. Our returner group is going to join us for a few strategies on how to deal with diminishers, but I think what I want to leave this new group with is this idea that when we see genius in others, when we ask the questions that get other people thinking, when we extend challenges that aren't simple tasks, but are uncomfortable, not like just giving someone this to do, but giving something that makes people uncomfortable, a stretch, that causes people to lean into it, that causes people to shake a little, to wobble. And if we cannot, as Justin said, like this tendency to rescue, if we can hold that stretch and give someone something hard to do and stand a little bit of suffering as they then grow and succeed, we end up creating an environment that's a little bit exhausting and totally exhilarating, which is what people said working for a multiplier was like. A little bit exhausting, totally exhilarating. I think it looks like this, and we might need max volume. And we can go ahead and, Shawn, we can bring the other group in. Oh, we might need a lot of volume.
Something.
There we go.
Yes.
Actually, let me pause this. Let me go back and let me tell you who this is. This is young Zia, not my daughter. She lives in Park City, Utah. She's on the ski club there. She has done the 20-meter ski jump before. She's at the top now of a 40-meter ski jump. She's got a GoPro camera on. This is going to be her first time down this 40-meter. It's a rookie moment in Ronnie's terms. I want you to see her go down it. I think it captures what it's like when we are led this way and get to work this way. Here we go. Again.
Fine.
And maybe more volume if we have it.
Well, here goes something, I guess. Okay, you can do this. I'm gonna jump.
You got it.
Whoa, my ski's slipping off.
Just remember, never snowplow, okay?
No snow plows.
Keep it straight, and you'll be fine. Do
Okay.
the same thing you do on the 20.
Straight. Do you go faster on the in run?
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Is it any steeper, do you think? Not much?
Same steepness, it's just longer.
Well, just longer. Just longer. Just a bigger 20, that's all.
Yep. Have
It's a
fun.
bigger 20. Go ahead. You got this. I got it.
It's fine. You'll be fine.
Okay. Here
The longer you wait, you'll be more scared.
I go.
Wait for it.
Easy, huh?
Just the suspense at the top of the first time freaks you out. That's the only thing. It's so fun. Huh? 60 seems like nothing now. Whoa!
Oh, exhausting but exhilarating. You know, there's a couple reactions we often get to this idea of leading like a multiplier. A lot of people, we don't find many people who say, actually, I'm going with the diminisher path. It works for me. I want to be the smartest one. Most people want to be multiplier leaders to others. But sometimes people get disheartened by it because, like, I can't live up to the ideal. Like, I'm going to come in with a micromanaging moment. I have my accidental diminisher tendencies. You know, the good news here is that being a multiplier does not mean that you don't have diminisher tendencies. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have diminisher moments. It's about shifting the balance. It's about shifting our weight and trying new things, but also shifting the balance. We run a Multiplier of the Year contest every year. The first winner, Casey Leonard, a woman at Nike who runs one of their design groups, she's an amazing leader. She said, being a multiplier is not about not being a diminisher. It's about stringing together as many multiplier moments as you can. You know, what could you do to shift the balance so that you have more multiplier moments around you? Maybe being a multiplier with more people, or being a multiplier more often, or maybe just ensuring that once a day you've got this multiplier moment. Another way we see people fall short is when they say, you know what, I want to lead this way, but the people around me don't lead this way. You know, we have found that most of the transformation inside of organizations doesn't start at the top, it starts in the middle. It starts with someone saying, I'm going to lead this way. I'm going to lead this way with my team. I'm going to lead this way with my colleagues, but also I'm going to lead this way upward. We want to spend our last few minutes together, and Shawn has rejoined us, and we're going to talk about how, you know, kind of an art form here. How do you deal with diminishers? Now, I've been at this for about 10 years, trying to rid the world of bad bosses. How do you think I'm doing?
Great.
A lot of room for improvement. Now, there will always be diminishing bosses, but we found that some people have better strategies for dealing with this. My guess is that a lot of you have diminishing bosses today or colleagues. Shawn and I want to give you a few strategies to do it. I want to tell you about a friend of mine, Captain Shawn Heritage. He is a commander in the U.S. Navy. He went to the Naval Academy, Johns Hopkins. He's a scientist. He's an innovator. He represents this breed of military leader that is innovative and inclusive and empowering. He gets assigned to a new command, and it's going to be a joint command, and he is going to be serving under He's a captain. He's going to be serving under a colonel, but not just a superior officer. It's going to be a superior officer from another branch of the military, the Air Force, who's not only from a different branch of the military, he leads very, very differently than Captain Heritage. He tells everyone exactly what to do. If you do it any different than how he does it, he shows noticeable disappointment. He criticizes everything people does around him. After about 2 months, this innovative, empowering kind of leader, he can't take it. He just can't work there any longer. He knows he has two more years serving under this colonel. He hits a wall, and he literally hits a wall. He's sitting in the colonel's office. He's just welling up with frustration. He just stands up, takes his fist, and just slams the wall. He kind of collects himself. He apologizes for his unprofessional behavior, and he leaves. He then goes talks to his peer group. Like, I can't do it. I can't keep working for this guy. He's like sucking the life out of us. Like, I wanted this to be like an innovative part of the military. And there are so many innovative parts in the military. His peer group say, you can't. Don't leave. Like, you are our beacon of hope. Like, you are a beacon of light to us. Like, we need you. He goes to his personal board of directors. Now, he doesn't have like an incorporated personal board of directors. He has a trusted group of advisors. And he vents to them, and he explains his frustration, and he reorients himself. He's got a disappointing boss, and he knows that. And he decides that instead of fixating on his disappointing boss, that he's going to be the kind of leader that he wishes he had. He's going to be the kind of leader that his team needs. He starts a culture club inside this military base for people who want to create this kind of culture. He invites the colonel to come to the meetings. He invites him to come to all the meetings so that the colonel can see firsthand the brilliant work that's being done by the team. He invites him in to the party. He counsels with them. He then decides that he's going to focus on what is most in his control. And what he decides is he has absolute control of in this chain of command is his office space. So he starts to redecorate his office space. And he, every week, brings in a new piece of art from one of his famous artists. He builds something. It's like Stay Amazing and all sorts of things. This is Captain Heritage. It becomes known across the base as the Wall of Optimism. Things start to change. The colonel dismisses his chief XO, and who does he put in second in command? Captain Heritage. A change in their relationship. About a year later, the colonel retires. And at his retirement speech, he talks about how he's changed as a leader. And he's talked about how Captain Heritage has caused him to think differently as a leader and to be a different kind of leader. A couple months later, Captain Heritage gets a call from a 3-star admiral in the Navy, and this is in the NSA, and he says, I want you to come to Washington, and not just for a meeting. I want you to come, and I want you to be my second in command. And I want you to bring this way of thinking and this way of leading with you to Washington. And he said, and Captain Heritage, when you come, will you bring the Wall of Optimism with you? You know, he went from sort of hitting a wall to really building the kind of organization that he wanted to be a part of. What we've learned is sometimes the best way out of the most diminishing situations is to multiply up. You know, to be the kind of leader that you wish you had, and to be a multiplier up into the organization. Shawn and I are going to wrap up, maybe spend the next 10 or so minutes sharing some strategies for how you can be, how you can deal with diminishers.
What's neat to me about this story with Captain Heritage is that he broke a cycle. We've all been part of this cycle. You know, most of us, what we found in the research is that the way that we tend to deal with the diminishing boss is that we first confront them, tell them that we don't like it, or we avoid them. Some people quit. Some people try to comply and to stay out of sight, or maybe you just try to ignore it. Unfortunately, what we found on the scale of effectiveness is that these same strategies don't really work. They don't break the cycle. So let's take a look at this. When we have somebody, I was working for somebody not too long ago who tended to be a bit of a micromanager. And we had this meeting that we were going to go to with the person who managed talent at Adobe. And before the meeting, my boss told me all the things that I was allowed to say and all the things that I wasn't allowed to say. And the list was so long that I couldn't remember it. After you get past 3, before you go into a meeting that you're nervous about, and he gave me like 15 things. You can imagine that when I got in the meeting, so first of all, my initial reaction is, what a jerk. He's just totally washed me down, micromanaged me, told me all the things I couldn't do. He's made me even nervous. And so I went into that. I immediately went into judgment mode, which is my reaction. And as I went into that, I was feeling critical. I was feeling a little angry. And I just kind of shut down. I actually just didn't say much. And then when I did say something, you can imagine it was one of those things that he had told me not to say in the first place. It was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. As I was so nervous. So what did I do as a result of this? I left the meeting. He told me all the things that I did wrong. You can't imagine. What do you think I did? The next time that we had a meeting with a senior executive, what do you think I did? I didn't invite him. So it wasn't too long after that, I was meeting with the CEO of a really large organization and talking about this program that we had. And so my counter was to exclude him. Well, he found out about this. What do you think he did? He absolutely made my life a living hell. And what he did is he told me he wanted me to not only share his calendar, he wanted me to share with him what I was doing with any leader above a certain rank or position ever, always. So he could decide if he needed to be there to coach me through it, because apparently I was an idiot and I couldn't do these meetings without him. So the outcome was we pretty much had a standoff, and I didn't involve him, and he continued to do everything he could to snoop in my business to re-engage. I didn't break the cycle. I went straight from feeling demoralized to judging to excluding him, and that just made him all the more interested to get into my business to make sure that I was going to mess up. Now let me contrast this story with a son of mine, and a few of you just heard this, but I think it's relevant because it just happened. When we break the cycle, there's a diminishing behavior. And I had a son that I was working with. Now, he's not my leader, but just the other day, he came home from his first day of school, and there was a behavior that he was doing that I didn't like. I was asking him questions. I was trying to find out how school went, how football practice went. And when I asked him questions, he just literally sat there and looked away. And this went on for like an hour or so. And I'm starting to feel a little frustrated. I'm starting to feel like this little punk. You know, like, who does he think he is? Doesn't he need to respect me? I'm his dad. I just spent the last couple of days making sure that all of his stuff was worked out for school and his football and all of this. Went and got the doctor's thing signed because we were out of town and all of it. And I was so frustrated. But I realized that maybe what he needed was for me to do a little shift. I needed to consider what was going on inside of him. I decided to get curious. This isn't normal behavior. Samuel isn't speaking to me. This isn't what my normal experience was like. So I went into his room, and we all talked about asking great questions today. I went in and I admitted to him. I said, Sam, I don't know what question I'm supposed to ask you. So I need your help because I'd really like to understand what's up. And he turned and looked at me with tears in his eyes and explained this whole experience that he had where he was the last kid that didn't get pads. And his coach's response to him was, you can wait 3 weeks when the pads come in and be a water boy until then. And it just was demoralizing. He didn't want to go back to school. He didn't want to go back to practice. And he looked at me and said, Dad, is there any way we can sort this out? The counter reaction was there was a mutual exchange. There was some empathy that was born of this curiosity. And now all of a sudden we were working with each other in a trusted way. The next day, we worked together through text and calls to figure out what he needed to do to be ready for practice. And the outcome was, when I picked him up from school, He was so excited to tell me about everything that had happened, the good and the bad. Now you might say, teenagers, coaches, different. I don't know. I mean, teenagers, coaches, or leaders, different. I don't know. Are they? Not maybe so much. But what happened was I had to become aware. I had to shift from reacting to judgment to moving into a curious mode. And through curiosity, it gave me a chance to be able to figure out what was driving the behavior that I was seeing. And that helped me make a different response to it. Instead, I was able to be raw and honest and share with him where I was really at, to get him involved. And then we were able to work through that experience with a completely different trust and investment in how we were going to work forward. This breaks the diminishing cycle. And it's not easy, and we're never going to get it perfect. But as we're multiplying up, curiosity still seems to be at the center of figuring out the way to be able to turn a diminishing boss, instead of into a standoff where now I'm a diminisher with him, to have it to where maybe I can multiply him just as Shawn Heritage did. So we're going to talk about a few ways that you can slip into that mode where I went into question mode. What are some other things that we can do?
Yeah, we're going to look at how do we multiply up, meaning be the multiplier to our bosses, to our leaders, to the people who are diminishing us. It means responding instead of responding with judgment, responding with curiosity. It might start with asking yourself 2 questions. When someone is diminishing you, maybe the first question you ask yourself is there another way to interpret this behavior? It helps us see the accidental nature of most diminishings. And then maybe you ask yourself a second question. What is the most generous and proactive way I can respond to this diminishing? To put us in the mindset to multiply. We're going to share 5 strategies. We've seen all of these strategies work. Several of these come from Apple. And the first would be to use your boss's strength. Now, I do a lot of executive coaching. I've done a lot of executive coaching at Apple. One of my assignments at Apple was a really interesting assignment was, Liz, we've got a couple executives for you to coach. And these are executives that we want to get Steve ready. Do you know what that means? Can you imagine what that means? Technically they said Tim Cook and Steve ready. That meant they're going to be working in that inner circle. They're going to be working at the highest levels in the organization. We need to get them ready to be meeting with Tim and meeting with Steve. Now, getting someone ready for Tim was one thing. Getting someone ready to meet with Steve was another. Because Steve could be opinionated. Need I say more? So my job was to get them ready for that. I went and talked to a man named Ron Johnson, someone who had a wonderful relationship with Bill Campbell. And Ron was known for working so brilliantly with Steve. I said, Ron, how do you work with Steve? And he said, well, here's what I do. He said, I know Steve has got strong opinions. He's a genius. Steve is brilliant. We all know this. He said, here's what I do. When I go to present to him, when I go to advocate for my ideas, he said, let's say we're going to be building a new store, a flagship store in Manhattan, like maybe their Fifth Avenue store. He goes in, he takes the plans that the teams have put together. He demands that his team does their very best work. He lays those plans for the new store in front of Steve, and he asks Steve one question. You see, Ron didn't wait for Steve to understand Ron's native genius. Ron was a retail genius. So Ron runs the retail part of Apple. He understands his boss's genius. He knows what Steve is better at than anyone else. What was Steve Jobs' genius? Nice and loud. See, we got to keep the shouting going.
Seeing what no one else can.
Seeing what else, when no one else can, and very specifically in that is making things better. He wasn't necessarily the originator of the idea, but he could take kind of a crummy piece of technology and he could make it brilliant. Ron knew that, and he intended to use Steve's brilliance himself. So what do you think that one question was? What did he ask Steve? He brings the plans for the store, he turns to Steve and he says, Steve, what can we do to make this better? And Steve now doesn't go into argue mode with him. What he does is says, oh, yeah, well, you know what? We could probably clear out this space. We could probably turn those cement steps into like acrylic steps to refract more light. And they walk out having collaborated, having great work made even more brilliant. Do you understand your own native genius? It's a basic for being able to understand the native genius of others. Do you understand the native genius of the people who work for you? And you might want to spend some time to understand the native genius of your boss so that you can be a multiplier to him or to her.
Yeah, and the next one is, you know, along this idea of a native genius, if you understand your native genius, you can go to your diminishing boss and you can share with them how to use you. I mean, the question is what do they have to be able to understand how to use you to get the very best? So you give them a user's guide. You can go to your boss and say, hey, you know, it's if you want this from me, here's what I can offer. Or if you want to accomplish X, I can offer B. Or if you need a problem solved like this, you can rely on me for that. I mean, it's this idea, we talked about it earlier in my group. When someone understands native genius, it's like putting a handle on a drawer that can now be used easily for the first time. But without that handle, we tend to take the path of least resistance. Isn't it true? Almost in anything. Our brains are programmed this way, to be efficiency-minded. And so you can imagine with our bosses, if they don't clearly understand what our native genius is, and we don't mean to be a prima donna and to say, I'm not going to do all this other menial stuff. You can use me for my native genius. Well, that's a good way to get fired or shelved. What we mean is, to help them understand what do you do easily and freely that they can take advantage of, and to give them examples so now they have a guide to you. And with that guide, there is a new path of least resistance that you have offered them. And the odds are they're going to use it.
Okay. A great multiplier gives people space to do their best thinking, gives people space for them to be at their best. Well, maybe when you're in a standoff with someone, with a boss, a leader, you need to step back and give them some space to be at their very best. We're talking about retreat and regroup. That same coaching assignment I had at Apple, I went and talked to one of the marketing executives about what she does and how she works so brilliantly with Steve Jobs, this brilliant individual and this brilliant leader. And she goes, oh, we all know Steve can get opinionated. And we know that when he is in that mode, it just doesn't behoove you to keep arguing. And she said, so when I go in and take an idea or I pitch to Steve and he starts to argue about it, I don't argue with him. I don't go head to head. What would you do? This is what she says. She says, you know what, Steve, you've given me new insight into this. These are things I hadn't considered before. You've given me some new ideas. She doesn't argue real time. She says, would it be okay if I take a day or two to think about some of the things that you've said here and to come back to you with a plan that incorporates these ideas? She said, Steve never denied that second meeting. He always was willing to meet with her. She didn't go back in and roll over and play dead and say, okay, Steve, we're just going to do it your way. She would take the best of her thinking, she would incorporate his input, and she would come back to him with an integrated plan that was always met with approval. Sometimes when people get hot-headed or argumentative or in know-it-all mode, we need to retreat and regroup, not so that we can do our best thinking, but to give the leader, the boss, a chance to do his or her best thinking and be at their best sort of leadership self.
I mean, and what that does as you retreat and regroup is it gives some space to think. And whether you're responding from a retreat and you're regrouping, or you are just recognizing that you're struggling to be fully utilized, you can assert your capability. If you ever tried to help a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old carry a plate or do something, maybe in an art project, what happens when you try to steady the ship or help them out? What do you get? No, stop. I can do this. It's their deep desire to grow and to have independence. And we can take that same strategy with the people that we work for. And maybe an effective way to do this is to give them a simple if-then analysis. If you want X, if you want for the sales presentation to come before we meet with the GM, let me know and I will be happy to send it to you 3 days before. But I want to own that. I don't want you to go and do that instead. This simple idea of asserting your own capability, it lets them know that you're happy to make sure that they get their needs met and whatever expectations they have, but that you have a deep desire for ownership. And it gives them a chance to allow you to own that, but oftentimes they need that clear if-then request to recognize your desire to play a critical role in the equation.
And then lastly, invite them to the party. We have a tendency when someone's diminishing us to kind of like straight arm them, to like hide what we're doing and to try to push someone away. It actually exacerbates the cycle. Like Shawn Heritage, you can invite them in to be part of it. He said, man, I felt like the Colonel and I, for the first time, we were like on the same ship. We were actually starting to work together. You can build that kind of trust. I think I would sum up what I've learned about how to deal with diminishers by sharing a sentiment that many of you have heard before. It's something from the great thinker, pastor, activist, civic leader, Martin Luther King Jr. He says, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. And then he says something that I think is so true for how we lead and how we can make an impact in organizations. He says, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do this. Where we receive diminishing leadership, when we return diminishing for diminishing, we're creating an organization that is frustrating, disempowering, soul-sucking. But when we choose to be the multiplier, we become that light in the organization, and it gives permission for other people to do the same. The last thought that maybe we would share with you is that, simply put, it's time for us to have lunch, so let me put this simply. Someone once said to me, they're like, Liz, these multiplier ideas are great, but you know what? The truth is you can't multiply 0. Like, true. What did he mean by that? You can't multiply 0. Let me show you a picture. Got to hear from Steve today. Stephen is not just our quarterback because he led the 49ers, but he was also my quarterback because I went to BYU, where he was there. We often think of leadership as maybe like the quarterback's role. When a pass is completed, whose victory is that? When a pass is incomplete, whose fault is that? See, it's one thing for the quarterback to throw the pass, to see the field, to watch the play, to make the play, to spot the person, to throw a brilliant pass in exactly right. But you've got to have the receiver make himself open, get untangled, and make the catch. See, you can't multiply 0, meaning that there's a leader's role in creating an environment where people are at their very best. But we also have a role. We have to kind of get ourselves open. We have to raise our hand and say, I'll take that hard thing. Here's my native genius. I'm not ashamed of telling people what I'm good at. Like, I'm okay having people know what I'm brilliant at. I'll sign up for the hard stretch. Yeah, Matt, I'll take the Mission Impossible challenge. Yeah, you know what? I'll take more than just the tasks. I'll take full ownership for that. We put ourselves in a position to be multiplied, for leaders to actually to use us at our very best. We'll end with this 2 videos. One of my favorite little videos, you've probably seen this on Facebook or a little viral video. It's a young man, some people see this as a young woman, but a young man stepping up to a challenge that his father has given him. And then we'll have maybe Bill be the final word on this.
미준이 형. 하고 뒤에 거지. 그렇지? 오케이. 뭐?
I love this. You know, creating an environment where everyone is at their best, where people are willing to stretch, it involves the leader who extends the stretch challenges, who invites people to do the hard thing, but it also involves the person who is willing to stretch. Creating an environment where people are brilliant, it involves people bringing their genius, bringing their full and complete and whole intelligence to work. But it takes more than just geniuses. It takes people who are willing to play the role of genius maker. I think it was the true genius of Steve Jobs is that he could be both a genius and a genius maker. I want our final word to come from Bill Campbell. It's an honor to be part of his legacy. Final word from Bill on why any of this matters.
Being a multiplier is crucially important, not just for Silicon Valley companies, but for every company that there is out there. Really can where the leadership has to take advantage of the rank and file. I mean, if you have great ideas that emerge from the organization, your company just obviously is going to get better. I talk about it in terms of management practices because I do think that where it starts is in that executive room where you can, if the CEO can do it with the management team is going to feel that way, feel empowered, and they're going to be able to do the same thing with their staffs, and it will cascade down to an organization. It's the way you get the best ideas.
Well, we can't thank Shawn and Liz enough for their presentation, but we could all stand up and giving a standing ovation to Shawn and Liz.
Thank you.
Take a moment when you're flight home or wherever, write them a quick note, thank you note. I think their words of wisdom were very, very inspiring and can impact all our lives. A few housekeeping items. A number of schools, sports information directors are asked for team photos. If a number of you are from the same university, Krista is going to arrange to have photos of your group here in this room during lunch over the next 15 minutes or so. So we're going to break for lunch. Any of your teammates want to get together for a team photo, it will be done here in the room. And then we're breaking for lunch. We're going to try and get back at 1 o'clock if we can make that work and try and stay on schedule. But again, go ahead. Yes.
I forgot one thing.
Surely.
I forgot one thing. For those of you who want a Multipliers book, I brought what I could carry. They were in the back here. There's a basket of them. We've got an Amazon shipment coming this afternoon, so there should be more books here for those of you who want them. I also brought some Rookie Smarts book based on what Ronnie Lott was saying this morning for those of you who are returners and have a multiplier book. If you want a book, well, first of all, don't take a book if you're not going to read it. But if you're going to read it, take it. If we run out of books, I've got quite a bit coming. All you need to do is just message us, info@the Group, liz@thewisemangroup.com, and we will mail you a book. And if we can help you in your journey of leading in any way, just reach out to us. We love you guys, so thank you.
Thank you.